Thanks for listening to the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. If you're joining us for the first time, please subscribe, leave a review, and thanks very much for joining us. Let me know how I'm doing. Those who are back and been listening for all this time, thanks so much for joining us back. If you want to know more about the podcast and the blog, go to voiceofjobseekers.com, and you can even leave questions or thoughts on the send voicemail button to the right of the page. My guest today is Karen Wickery, who wrote the newly released book, Taking the Work Out of Networking, An Introvert's Guide to Making Connections That Count. If you're struggling with connecting with people on or offline, and maybe perhaps you might be an introvert, Karen's book is for you. Even if you're not an introvert, you'll find some very practical strategies in the book, because I've read a good portion of it. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Hey, Mark, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. You've been pretty busy, so I want to go ahead and get jumping. I want to give people a little context first. Karen is the former editorial director for Twitter, and has also worked for Google and Wired.com in significant roles. Again, I appreciate especially talking. I think it's the first time I had somebody who's actually has played a significant part at the beginning of Twitter. Is that correct?
Well, early days of Twitter, I knew the founders, but I was still at Google actually when they started.
Mm-hmm.
And I came over to join Twitter in 2011. So it was about 4 years into their run.
Okay. Good deal. Yeah, it was about 2007. I think I think I joined Twitter 2008, and
Pretty,
pretty early considering. And
yeah.
I remember I put a couple of I joined a couple of people, and one was on this podcast. His name is Brent, and today I'm connected with him still after all these years. But he kind of had a few jokes. I think he was my first connection. I think I joined Oprah as second, and there was somebody else as third. And he makes some jokes about him, and Oprah being, my first two. He says, "Me, I don't understand. Oprah, I can understand." So this kind of funny story there with me and Twitter. But yeah, I love Twitter still to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an awesome tool, which is connected to what we're talking about today, is networking for introverts. And I think, and though this is not completely part of my outline, though I'll make it related. Um, I think people get, at first, when we were on Twitter, as well as all the other, you know, social networks, there was always this thing about having numbers, having lots of numbers. And I remember when I joined, and somewhere along the line, it was somebody who was much younger than I was. I got kind of 1,000. He thought I got 1,000 followers real fast, and I didn't think it was a big deal. But he says, "Wow, I've never seen somebody who's not a celebrity got 1,000 followers." I'm going, "Well, maybe I was just a little diligent." But your views on the quality versus the quantity of connections. I imagine in your mind, quality matters a whole lot more than quantity.
Correct. This follower count thing is doesn't really do you any good, I think, over time for most of us. Maybe for celebrities, that's something that matters, but not for most of us.
Hmm.
And it's really not about a numbers game as much as it is that you have some personal connection to
Right.
who you know, and what the context is, how they can help you, and how much you might help them.
Yeah, I really believe that if you're others focused, it makes it a lot easier to um, gain a better understanding than if you're just focused in on what you need. Um,
Exactly
yeah,
right.
that connection about. I mean, even though when you hear it in terms, people often is this discussions often mislead because those who are often leading those discussions talk about how many they have, but you don't have to be like me, and it kind of interrupts the whole idea that quality matters a whole lot more than quantity.
No, that's exactly right. It's really, I mean, there's a reason the subtitle of my book is "Making Connections That Count."
Hmm.
It's not counting the connections you have. It's making ones that really, count, that are people who are meaningful and useful to you, and vice versa.
Right. Now, to this day and age, I still look at when somebody connects with me either on Twitter or on LinkedIn, I don't automatically connect with them. I kind of check out who they are and what they're about. And a quality to me is going to be, of course, different than uh, for a lot of us, but a lot of people uh, probably need to take more account in what kind of why this person, or if there's a why behind that person that you can add, not particularly what they can add.
No, that's right. And I think that, maybe a holdover of this obsession with follower counts is that people just accept everybody,
Right.
ask everybody and accept everybody. But the fact is, you want context about why the connection is interesting and possibly useful. Uh, and so for that reason, I tell people, for example, on LinkedIn, don't just send the invitation to connect with the LinkedIn language that's there,
Hmm.
which is, I think, just I'd like to join your network, or something like that. Instead, you know, say something about why they interest you, because like you, I put aside those requests that have
Hmm.
no context. No, I don't know why I am connecting with that person, right? If they don't tell me something about why.
Right.
Uh, and the same, for me, I wouldn't just put out a cold request to someone and say, "Hey, I want you to join my network," because they'd ask the same thing, "Why?" So you need to say, I'm interested in your company. I'd like to know how you got your job. I'd like to know, uh, more about the article I saw you post, or if you're going to such and such conference, something that starts the conversation, right? That gives someone a reason to respond to you.
Right. I think that's what makes the difference between. I mean, I think there are extroverts, honestly, who are probably just as discerning as an introvert. But for introvert, I think there is a little bit more meaning behind. If I'm going to exert energy, I need to make it count.
That's it exactly. That yes, you want to make it count, and you want the uh, other person to understand where you're coming from, just as you want to understand why someone else is coming to you. So it's really a little bit of the golden rule here.
Right. Now, it's a little bit misguided too, being that um, particularly LinkedIn gives favor to the quantity of connections as opposed to the quality of connections. I mean, it seems to me the more people you have, naturally, the more people you'll be able to reach. It seems like LinkedIn and Twitter and even Facebook rewards those numbers as opposed to considering the engagement activity. Even though, so it's kind of double speak in a sense.
It's true. They have their reasons for liking number of followers, but it's not the same as your reasons
Right.
for who you're following. So it's just good to keep in mind. Uh, they have their agenda, and you have yours. You want to make the platforms work for you.
Right. Let's talk about a few steps on how to uh, make the best of what you get as far as making quality connections. In your experience,
Hmm.
what are two or three things that have worked for yourself and others who've really are not into the big numbers, but they really want to make it the most meaningful experience as possible?
Well, there's nothing to replace the personal connection.
Hmm.
So if somebody says to you, "I want to introduce you to so and so because I think you two would really like each other," or you're going to want to talk to him or her about what you're looking for.
Right.
Take that invitation. Say yes to that invitation. Do not put it off.
Mm-hmm.
Just say yes. I'd like to meet that person. How do you want to follow up? Because if you kind of default to yes for that thing that's offered, that introduction that's offered, um, it's not going to be your whole answer. It's not going to be an automatic job offer from that person,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be a step along the way from someone who knows a little bit about you, who has some context, and you don't know where the conversation will go. It could be that person says, "You know what? I'm not the right one to talk to, but I'm going to introduce you to my friend
Mm-hmm.
because they know much more about that subject. They know
Mm-hmm.
much more about how to get into that company."
Mm-hmm.
And off you go, right? It's kind of an ongoing path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say default to yes on when these introductions are offered. If for yourself you want to meet specific people, you're hunting down details about a job or a company or a city, even if you're moving to a new city,
Mm-hmm.
just make that clear in your outreach. And if you don't have enough direct outreach on LinkedIn, say, work your own personal network of friends and say, here's what I'm looking for specifically.
Mm-hmm.
People who will know about X, Y, and Z. That's who I want to talk to. Here's why I'm looking. Like give context all around so that your friend, your contact can say, oh, okay, I'm going to pass that along.
Right.
And it's okay to nudge your friend, okay to
Mm-hmm.
bug a little bit,
Right.
but as far as LinkedIn goes, to be as clear as possible in your sort of "May we connect" note
Mm-hmm.
is also good, because I'm relying on good human nature here that people will say, I do see, I can help, or I understand what this request is for.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't Not going to take too much of my time. I want to help, and I feel like if we're all in that spirit, things go better for all of us.
Absolutely. Um, do you ever read the summary of the person that's connecting before you actually connect with them? And
All
does
the
that
time.
matter? Does that matter to you?
All the time. I'll tell you why it matters. First of all, if I don't know them and don't have any context, I am going to look and see, well, maybe we have things in common. Maybe this is someone I'm interested in connecting to,
Mm-hmm.
even if they didn't tell me why in a personalized note. We might have a lot of friends in common.
Mm-hmm.
I might say yes, but I always am going to look. I'm not just going to go on the yes no option that LinkedIn gives you.
Right.
But in general, beyond accepting or not, someone saying yes, um, sorry, the LinkedIn summary has a real value for everybody, and that is where you can say, in not necessarily these words, I'm looking for a job. That is
Mm-hmm.
where you can say, basically, I want to change fields. I want to. I'm moving to a new place. Whatever it is, you can do that in broader language up top
Mm-hmm.
before we get to your job chronology,
Right.
right? So
Right.
up top you can be aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
You can say all of my work in customer service has led me to a new passion in another field, and that's the field I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You can explain a little more up at the start. That helps give even more context to people.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of the LinkedIn summary, actually, especially when it goes up about 5,000 feet from your job history.
Right. Yeah. I think um, you know it can happen intuitively, but a lot of people don't consider all the tools that are even there. I think a lot could be told in it could be told in the headline even. The headline
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
there's just a ton of that, and you don't even have to go to the person's page.
That's right.
If you hover above and the headline is there in their little avatar that shows up.
That's right. So how you describe yourself,
Yeah, and
it's exactly right.
yeah, and one thing I was talking with a couple of colleagues lately is when people are all about selling, you can pretty much you could pretty much tell from that headline. And I've actually declined Oh, I think maybe 50 or 100 folks recently, because all in the headline is you could tell that they're about to sell me. They're about to sell me my servers sometimes. Really,
Yeah,
I'm a career consultant. I help people with different phases of the career. Say, well, if you're looking to change career, I'm not looking to change careers.
an imperfect algorithm there.
Right. I mean, all they're going to do is send me a note saying that they're going to sell me a service, the same service that I offer. Why would I do
Right.
that?
Yeah.
So I think, there's some thoughtfulness that will work well for people that would want to connect. And you could save yourself a lot of heartache because
Right. Right.
nothing sucks more than, you connect with someone and then they just send you and say, well, if you want some help, let me know.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
it's
it's akin to, I've worked in journalism for a long time, and
hmm
it's akin to a PR person pitching a reporter something that has nothing to do with what the reporter covers,
yeah.
right?
hmm
Same idea. So it's like, get some background here before go in with your sales pitch,
Right.
essentially.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, another part that kind of leads on, and you mentioned about mutual connections. Um, there's studies that show that what they call weak ties, and
Mm-hmm.
talk about that in your book, um, meaning the third and maybe fourth connection types, people you don't have a relationship with, but because somebody's liked in if you look socially somebody's liked something or have shared something from their third connection, or even for the fact that there's some familiarity with the third connection, that's
Mm-hmm.
considered a weak tie.
Mm-hmm.
uh, but introverts kind of they say, well, this person may not be related and they might be too hasty to judge, when that might be an opportunity uh, through a weak tie.
Yes, that's right. The reason I actually talk about this at some length in my book is that um, people often think too narrowly about who their network is. They think, well, I don't really have a network, or it's really just the people I know on Facebook who are kind of friends and family.
hmm
But actually, you know more people than you think you know. You have a bigger network in waiting than you think you know, and that includes weak ties. For me, might be people I've worked with in the past but don't really keep up with, or
hmm
people I've worked at some companies where I was friendly with some of the vendors or the contractors that offered services to the company. They're weak ties, right? I don't directly keep up with them.
hmm
It could be that it is, um, friends of friends who you met for drinks after work at some point, but you really hit it off and had a good conversation. Someone who you've been introduced to, but maybe didn't follow up in the past. There's all kinds of people who can be weak ties,
Right.
and the thing about them is, for when you're doing outreach to learn about a new job or a company or find out about openings, it can be those very people. If you say, this is the thing I'm looking for, this is the question I have, they can say, oh, well, now that I know that's your question, I can't help, but I know someone who can, or actually I know a lot about that because of the work I do.
hmm
So they wouldn't know to reach out to you because they're weak ties, right?
Right.
You're
Right.
not in touch, but they may be very helpful. And in fact, the whole notion of weak ties started from a sociological study in the 70s, and the professor who ran it found that more people in a control group found their next job through weak ties than through strong ties.
hmm
So they have an importance, and it's just a matter of understanding who and when uh, to tap them and to be as broad and open as possible.
Yeah. And how you treat the second tier of relationships
Right. That's right.
often can lead you to the third if
Yeah,
if the second tier isn't mistreated.
that's right. Again, we get to the golden rule.
Right. treat others as
Yeah.
you would like to be treated,
Yeah.
even though the people who are selling have no conscience of that
Right. Yeah.
whatsoever.
That's
Um,
right.
Finally, you mentioned a very interesting concept. I don't know if it was your original one or not, but you talk about the personal ecosystem, and that connected with me immediately as I
Mm.
began to draw visuals for myself. That's how I, you know, the
Hmm.
crazy thought world of mine. But perhaps you can get a little bit deeper on why that's so significant for introverts and the whole networking piece altogether.
Well, when I started on this book, I noticed I asked people, I asked my um, communities on both Facebook and Twitter, what is it you hate about networking,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of people said, I hate that it's phony. I hate that it's transactional. It just seems very awkward and insincere. And I thought, part of the problem is the word networking itself conjures up those kind of reactions
Hmm.
right away. And I wish we had another word. And so to me, when I think about my own network, not the verb, but the noun network, I think, well, that is my personal ecosystem.
Hmm.
That is the web of people who I know, some better than others,
Hmm.
past jobs, current jobs, it's a mix of things, but that is if you hate the word network, maybe it's your personal ecosystem rather than your network.
Hmm.
But network can be it is there for you, and it is. I like the ecosystem part of it because it sort of it implies kind of a synergy, right, between giving and taking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I think about it.
Right. There's just I imagine that if um, gosh, I'm trying to avoid using this word personal branding, but
Yeah, I avoid that too.
it does have a purpose, just not for every single thing. But for the sake of argument here, if your reputation is one that connects someone to you're always connecting something to someone and someone to someone, then that becomes an attractive part of who you are, and that's what comes to you naturally. If it doesn't, then it takes a whole lot more work to change that.
Probably uh, probably true, but I think if you are open to kind of the giving and getting part of it and helping someone else, maybe think of it as pay it forward,
Mhm.
maybe it becomes less hard then.
Yeah.
Again, not a big numbers game, but
Right.
just a way in which you say, you know what, someone helped me with an introduction to apply for that job that I ended up getting.
Hmm.
I want to help someone else. So maybe it's just sort of a kind of one to one thing rather than thinking I have to, now have a big number of people surrounding me. There's something about the kind of let me help someone else
Right.
because the fact is everybody is going to need help with an introduction or some information they don't have. It's jobs, yes, but also more than jobs, and so beyond jobs, and so we all are going to need to turn to our personal ecosystem at times for advice and guidance and introductions and leads.
Hmm.
And so if you can take a long view of it, which is what I would advise, because it is a long game, um, then you can reward others and be rewarded yourself by the kind of feeling open and being able to connect and connect others.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that it is a long game because most people, unfortunately, I say most, whether it's 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, um, unfortunately, the bulk of people who will hear this, they'll jump right out thinking that the rewards are going to just jump in their face because they're using the particular technique. When really, it's about cultivating and fostering and really, to some degree, sifting wheat, if we will.
Yes, exactly. Making connections that count. That itself is a long game, and that's why I think people hate networking because the notion of it because they think, oh, I have to go do this because right now I need a job. Right, I
Hmm.
just got laid off, or they've reorganized. I got to go do this now. This thing I hate doing.
Right.
So then they feel needy and under time pressure. That's not a good combo.
No.
So if you can make it kind of a regular habit to be in touch with people, be open to meeting new people, taking introductions, making introductions, then it's not as daunting when you actually have a new need. Then you can turn to your group, your personal ecosystem, and say, "Hey, now it's my turn. I need something."
Right, right. And,
Yeah,
and it's not even just about the announcement itself at all.
right, right.
There's just some things that will come naturally if you are engaged, at least
Yeah,
to the point of where you're giving, you're listening, listening, and listening, and then when it's time, it's not a big to do. It's like, hey, I just need. It's not a big a big reveal, so to speak.
that's right.
It becomes very natural because it's been a part of what you've been doing all along. But
That's my theory.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a very viable theory, and I think we've all learned that at one point or another, whether we were kids and say, "I want to be your friend." Oh yeah, can I have a bite of your Suzy Q? As opposed to, as opposed to say, "Hey, I like what you're doing, and eventually I'd like to know how you do it." And that makes all the difference in the world. Therefore, you're not. People won't disarm or seek to disarm you very quickly. So
Yes.
this is definitely a very useful book for anyone. Again, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or somewhere points in between, taking the work out of networking, an introvert's guide to making connections that count. If people want to know more about you and about what you do, Karen, where can people find you?
So my website is just my name, KarenWickery.com. That's Wickre. My Twitter handle is probably the most active, and that's KVOX. V is in Victor there, KBox. And that's probably the two easiest places to find me.
Although I'm intrigued now, why K Box?
It's a lot easier than Wickery. It's shorter, and I've had it for a long time, and I'm a writer, and so it's the voice of Karen.
Gotcha. It that's quite original. I love it actually. I may steal it one day. No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. Thank you, Karen, for joining us, and I will have a link to where you can buy the book, and it's published by Simon and Schuster, which doesn't happen very often in this show. Some great stories, actually, I have of Simon and Schuster, but totally irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Well,
It,
thank you, Mark, for having.
yes, and for the rest of you, thank you very much for joining us. If you want to know more about the podcast, you want to go to voiceofjobseekers.com. You can always go to the Voice of Job Seekers in iTunes, download the podcast, subscribe to it. You can write me a review if you like, an honest one. You love it, hate it, let me know. In the meantime, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to talking with you in the next couple of weeks. Take care.